Hi and welcome to a new episode of the State of the Net podcast. I'm Paolo Valdemarin.
And I'm Ewan Semple.
And this is episode 25.2.
I was going to say, it's not quite new, is it?
Yeah, we already recorded this episode a couple of days ago, but then we had some technical glitch, so we're recording it again.
Technology, eh?
Yeah, we hate it. So there is this new thing that it never happened to me before. I use iCloud to store the recordings of the podcast because I don't have a lot of disks and, I have plenty of storage in the cloud. But what has been happening is that every time I start GarageBand, it doesn't have to just download the last file I was working on, but apparently it downloads all the open recent files. So It takes 10 minutes every time. It's just stupid.
So you're meaning that the actual files, GarageBand files, are stored in the cloud? Okay.
Because I don't have storage, so
Right.
Basically every time I save a file to the disk, 5 minutes later it gone. It gets uploaded and removed from the disk, which is great. And I love the fact that technology. I don't have any control, and that is probably something slightly annoying.
Yeah.
Is this idea of not being, you have this very clever thing that does things by itself, but it's just not clever enough. Did you see the launch of the space mission?
I didn't.
It was amazing. I've been following all those news, so basically I was stuck to the YouTube channel for 24 hours, and it is incredible. But what I found most interesting is there were some people comparing the user interface of the old space shuttle with this new, 3-screen, couple of dozen buttons, and that's it. Very sleek. What no one was really saying is that the pilots were not really piloting anything. They were just sitting there because it's completely self-guided.
Yeah.
So, they weren't in control either. And
it's quite deeply disconcerting, isn't it? I mean, it's like we were talking the other day about the photo management and, iPhoto, or Photos as it's now called, on the Mac and iOS devices. It's really clever. I mean, it's making taking photographs and sharing photographs easier, arguably, than it's ever been. But there are some things like having a 5,000 photograph limit on shared albums. That means that I can't share my whole library with the rest of my family. And I ended up doing this really clunky, shifting big amounts of photos and moving them from one account to the other on the computer and blah, blah, blah. And of course, each time I'm moving them, it's all trying to synchronize up the different accounts with the cloud again. So I have to wait, for like a day for it all to happen. And I know there'll be people, maybe one or two people who use PCs will be listening to this thinking, well, that's what you get for going with Apple. If you had an Android device, you'd be in control of all these things. But it is.
Yeah.
I know. I didn't believe it as I said it.
Yeah. No, I wasn't aware. I never tried to share more than 5,000 photos with anyone, but I must say that the management of photos these days on the Apple platform, I'm not saying it's not good on other platforms as well. It's very good.
Oh, so, yeah.
Actually, we did cover this very same topic on the last episode, so we should just.
Did we?
Yeah. We said you can search photos in Photos.
Oh, that's true. Well, I'm sort of becoming increasingly feeling like I'm Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. And I think a lot of people are beginning to feel this with the lockdown. I'll just sort of get up and I'll make a coffee and I'll let the cat out and I'll think, have I done this already today? Or was this yesterday?
Yeah, as they say, 2020 is January, February, March, July, August, September.
Well, yeah. Somebody was saying it's a special leap year. There's 29 days in February. There's 5 months in March. And 6 years in April.
I saw that. It was brilliant.
But what we can't do is go through this whole podcast saying what we were talking about the last time we recorded this. But it was kind of along that theme, wasn't it, of agency and loss of control and
And Westworld.
And Westworld. Talk about loss of control. Goodness me. So yeah, we should do the warning again that we will. I mean, massive spoilers in this. So if you haven't watched Westworld, switch off now because it's
and go watch Westworld.
And go watch Westworld. But it was just. And I did people...
For those of you who are just back after watching Westworld, welcome back.
You will recover eventually. Because so many people had told me that I should watch it, and I'd kind of ignored them. But boy, should I have watched it before. Because it touches on so many themes that I'm fascinated by, about consciousness and artificial intelligence and morality and ethics and power and governments and structures and technology. It's just got the lot, and it's so cleverly mixed together in this time-shifting, mind-bending, clinging desperately to any form of narrative. I mean, it makes Game of Thrones look like Enid Brighton in terms of the unpredictable storyline. But fascinating. Loved it.
Me too. I liked it very much, especially the third season, when it kind of reconnect with quote unquote the real world.
Yeah.
And it's very complex, and there are quite a few interesting ideas around, consciousness. Are these machines conscious? And what defines that? It's pretty good. And I also like very much the idea of using the simulation as a way to collect information about the behavior of people, so that you can eventually build a supercomputer that can predict what everybody will do.
Like, that's not happening to us now. Hello, Mr. Zuckerberg. I'm here.
Yeah, well, I mean, given the type of ads I'm seeing, let's say if that is what they're on to, it's probably not working.
That's so true. Well, I hope. God, can you imagine the dystopian world we would end up if they did take the algorithm seriously? Goodness me. But it's funny with Westworld, because you're right, the last series was the one that really stretched you and made you think hard. But I found myself getting... Well, when I watched the first series, I was a bit upset at the level of violence and blood, blood, guts and whatever. But I found myself in the last series feeling nostalgic for the good old days of just simple carnage, when you didn't have to think too much about it. Well, but so talking about simple world carnage, and so there are bits of the last show which have scenes of rioting and anarchy breaking out, and just uncannily paralleled by what's happening in America at the moment. And it's just watching the television. I was about to say not to get political, but it's beyond political, isn't it? I mean, it is like watching. It's like watching Breaking Bad and. Everything combined is horrendous.
Yeah, it's odd. I mean, you really have the feeling that there are good people and bad people. I mean, it feels as a show from that point of view, because it's not even about ideologies anymore. I mean, it's like, is being anti-racist an ideology? I mean, it's like, really? It's almost feel like being human.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
What do you think of Twitter and Facebook opposite reactions?
Well, we've talked about this in previous podcasts.
I know, but somebody lost the file.
Not the last recording, previously, even more previously. I've got mixed feelings about it, because I don't want, and it's all confused by are Twitter or Facebook media companies or not. They're not generating the content. Are they responsible for the content they then publish? And I'm uncomfortable with them assuming the role of arbiters of truth or good taste or whatever, cultural norms, not least because it's an almost impossible task, given the vast numbers of people that use their systems all around the world with entirely different, well, not entirely different, we're all human beings, to your point. But it just, I don't know, it makes me feel uneasy. I don't think Twitter did the wrong thing. I think the way they handled it was actually very effective. Not deleting Trump's posts or banning him or anything, but just putting them behind a bit of effort to go and look. was a good response. And it's hard not to see Zuckerberg as fudging it and not coming out and making a decent decision. So I don't know. How about you?
Well, yeah, no, I agree that the way Twitter handled it is interesting, and the fact that people are claiming that they're being censored is bullshit, in the sense that they have not been censored. They just added a note to the post. I think that there is a little bit of a false dichotomy between, are they a media company or they're not media company? Of course, they're not media company. I mean, trying to fit the regulation of media companies to social media doesn't make any sense.
No.
They are a new thing, so try to apply old laws to new things. It's silly.
Yeah.
I do think that the problem, I do think that they're winging it. They're trying to figure out what to do, and it's and the real challenge is that even no decision is a decision.
Yeah.
And it's hard. So why? I would like to ask Zuckerberg. Why yes racism, no nipples.
Yes.
It's like okay, you don't want to be the judge of that, but you are actually making a decision. You are saying that is not appropriate. So it's about where you put that limit, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's what I mean. It's a very murky, complex, I'm not sure they're going to end up doing the right thing kind of a world to step into, isn't it?
And if you think about it, it's also very related to who is watching what. I mean, what is considered decent in one country might not be considered decent in another. And for these multinational companies that actually operate everywhere, do they follow different rules in different places?
Yeah.
I mean, if you are Facebook in a dictatorship, is going to be a different Facebook than Facebook in a democracy, and Facebook in an American democracy is supposed to be working different from Facebook in the, British democracy. I mean, it's so hard.
And you're doing this in the context that America might be morphing into a dictatorship at the same time anyway. So,
yeah, no, probably not anytime soon, but it's not looking good.
So it relates to a post I shared on Facebook by an Advaita. Well, he's not actually. He's just a very interesting thinker about consciousness and what it means. But he had this great post about our desire to do the right thing, to do good. And I can't do it justice now, but a very compelling and interesting argument about how problematic it is and how concepts like good and bad are themselves very problematic and very contextual and very varied. And, even down to the thing about Black Lives Matter and then people getting all bent out of shape about all lives matter. And, I don't take part to some extent in that tit for tat, backwards and forwards kind of posting, because yes, it's awful, and yes, it's endemic, and we should all be doing whatever we can to prevent racism or sexism, all the horrendous injustices that still happen. But shouting about them and telling other people how to behave, from my perspective, just inflates it all, makes it worse and polarizes. That's the kind of amplifying that we're watching happening on the web all the bloody time on every topic under the sun, and it doesn't make it better. But you're then left, as I am, worrying, gosh, am I just standing back and letting injustice happen? So it's really, really tough not to make things worse and trying to make them better, whatever better means.
I think if this is the same post I remember, it was very interesting because it was saying, people trying to do the right thing, people trying to be good usually create huge disasters. And rather than trying to be good, you should try to be wise.
Yes.
And I like the idea of, at least the way I interpreted it, is it's not about coming with a preconcept about what good is, but it is basically being present and reacting to what is happening to you. So you're not you're not doing, of course you carry with you your values and your ideas, but you don't have a predefined concept of what is good and bad, which is probably a little bit of the challenge. It is a challenge when you ask an infrastructure like a social media platform to basically be good. And,
or just
and
to
it's
decide
like
what good
saying,
is. Yeah.
Exactly. So I do like the idea of, try to be wise, try to do the right thing, try to react as much as possible in the right way, and influence what you can, but be in the moment and not just come with a whole bunch of preconcepts.
Yeah, and being different. I was chatting to a friend, black friend on Facebook, who's suffered abuse here in the UK. Her brother got beaten up and just shit, and so she was feeling, should she leave Facebook because of Zuckerberg's decision, whatever. And we were just chatting about it on Facebook, and I was making this point that toxicity is there, and you can try and filter it out, but I then feel, am I running away by filtering it out? And then I was saying to that, I think the most we can do, the best we can do, as you say, Paolo, is just to be different and to act different and to be visible, acting differently or responding differently to the world around us, in the hope that other people watch that and decide they want some of it, and it shifts in that direction, because anything else just tends to wind things up, doesn't it?
I think that there's also this idea of, and probably the strongest reaction that you could have to Facebook is not to leave, but is to stop allowing Facebook to change you or to make you feel things.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a bloody website. You're not suffering from it. So, I mean,
yes.
I guess that the problem is that the way Facebook is designed is to try to trigger emotions so that it becomes more engaging, and basically it attracts you. And, I was having a discussion recently with a friend who was very upset about the news. And I was saying, look, I understand, and I agree that what is happening is bad, but it doesn't make sense for you to be upset, because it doesn't really change anything. And I'm not saying that you need to be insensible, but just being carried away by fear, by rage, by all the feelings that these systems are designed to trigger is what makes them win. So, and it's hard because it's a form of addiction to some degree, and as you teach me, it's easier to just step away and stop doing that altogether than trying to be moderate. But I think that the real skill that we all need to develop is, how do we stay on Facebook but without getting carried away by emotions? Because I think that will allow us to be much more wise, and to be able to react in a more balanced way. And if we get enough people to behave like that, then you can finally use Facebook as a way to communicate with your friends, to be up to date, to be informed, which are all great things, without being addicted and without being sad or mad or whatever strong emotion Facebook is triggering.
But that's where it's a great training ground in some respects, because that thing about triggering, that's the little me, that's the ego, that's just the sort of vulnerable self that feels it has to defend itself against all comers. And again, we've talked about this before, about the narrative we build up about what I am and what you are and why it's different and why I need to defend myself against you. And those are the buttons that those platforms are so good at pressing. And I genuinely use it almost as a practice, sort of mindfulness practice, of just being able to be in that space. And when something triggers me, instead of reacting, just notice the triggering, and just think, oh, hang on, I've just kicked off. What's happening here? Why am I getting bent out of shape by those few words on that screen on my phone? And as you say, then being able to just in that moment step back and just think, well, it's not real, actually. In fact, I posted about this, about being buffeted backwards and forwards by, oh, that's terrible, oh, that's great, I wish it was like that, how could they do that? And to remind ourselves that none of it's real. And of course, the first thing somebody came back and says, well, this suffering is real, of course it's real. No, that wasn't what I meant. It's not happening to you here now. It doesn't mean you don't care about it, but it does mean that you don't totally get immersed in it or bent out of shape by it.
I guess the whole point is, because I care, the fact that I can step back and understand that this is not happening to me, I am not the one suffering, allows me to have a better reaction and maybe to do something about
Totally.
it. Which is better than walking away and say, I can't
or
deal
getting
with it.
wound up and doing the wrong thing or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Or the opposite.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's true in life generally. It's just that it's a bit more, as is everything, amplified in the online world. And what's fascinating is that it's so cerebral. It is genuinely only happening in our heads. The whole thing, the whole experience, it's just little flickering lights on a screen that we interpret and read into all sorts of massive things that we're just making up, and remembering that would be a good thing. Because by not remembering it and by engaging in it and indulging in it, that's what gives plonkers like Trump power. That's what that's what gives them the levers and the buttons to press that makes people behave in ridiculous ways. Don't let them.
Yeah, and we can probably say that a pretty big chunk of people that follow him are exactly the type of people who want to do good.
Yes. I mean, I don't think there is nobody wakes up in the mornings and thinks, I'm going to be a wee shit. They're all trying to be good in misconceived ways.
I guess, look, I was watching earlier today, I was practicing moderation and self-control by watching a video on Facebook of some lady in a demonstration of a new group of whackers coming out in Italy, who was basically saying of how the prime minister got in touch with Bill Gates, who got $140 million so that they can inject mercury in the veins of people so that with 5G they can control them and raise the temperature of their body and kill them. Or something along this line. And I mean, I had read a couple of posts that were basically saying this story. But then for the first time, I clicked and actually watched the video. And this lady, she was distraught. I mean, she was yelling at the top of her voice from the thing. I mean, she was really concerned that this was happening.
Yeah.
In her mind, this was true.
Yeah.
And it's like saying, look, I still think you're an idiot, but I'm sort of sorry of the fact that you're feeling this, because it's clearly wrong.
Well, that's where I mean, I've said to the kids in lots of conversations about the only way to deal, and it sounds so counterintuitive, but the only way to deal with somebody like Hitler is to try to have compassion for them. Can you imagine what it's like to live in a world where behaving like that seems okay? It's hell on earth.
Or travel back in time and kill him, but
well, obviously, so then you get into the whole thing about, the episodes of Doctor Who where it gets very dodgy if you go back in time and you try and change things. Because of the whole Buddhist interconnected thing about everything that's happening now is an inevitable consequence of all the things that have happened before, the good and the bad. And there we are, we're back to good and bad. If you eliminate all the bad things, the world just goes completely tits up because they're part of life.
I don't know, but we can't try anyway, so there's no point discussing that. Maybe it would be good, right? You remove all the bad thing, and then we're here, happy.
But how would you know what was good then if all the bad had gone?
I feel good. It's like I'm here. Probably, if everything was good, I would be on the beach with a cocktail.
You'd get bored. I've been on those beaches in fancy places with cocktails, and you get bored after 5 minutes. You want a bit of conflict and distress just to make yourself feel awake.
All right. I was conflicted about which cocktail, but I think more conflict.
Well, and I gave up drinking, so that solved the problem another way.
But I did hear that you have kind of a beach in the garden now.
An inflatable pool.
That's cool.
It was a result, but because it was ridiculously expensive, because people are putting premiums on them because nobody can get hold of them, and it's just very cheaply made. But my daughter emailed back and said there's a problem with it, it's leaking slightly and there's a bit that's distorted, and they said, "Oh, have another one." So we're now going to have 2 large inflatable pools in the back garden. So how posh is that?
Sell tickets. I mean, I hope that you enjoyed them during the spring and summer that just finished today.
Well, I know.
I have no idea if this is true, but some say that this is the driest spring since 1929.
Yeah, I saw it in your blog post. Yeah.
Which makes me think that, dry springs come with the economic crash of the century.
You'll be believing in astrology next.
No, probably not.
But
but you can't tell me that this is a coincidence, right?
But that was funny because we were talking about the weather. This is not unrelated ramblings, although it may sound like that to anybody who's still listening. But that whole thing about control and needing to feel in control, or, we were talking about the weather and how let down or annoyed my wife can be when it's not the weather that they said it was going to be. They said it would be sunny.
They guaranteed that it was.
That's right. It's, it was on the BBC. It must have been, And whereas I'll just really genuinely not care, and I'll wake up and go, "Oh, okay, it's raining. I'll put a coat on." If it didn't rain, we wouldn't have green grass. And, it's just this. But it's the fact that people have sort of been given this expectation that we've got the technology that allows us to predict accurately what the weather's going to be. And then when it doesn't shape up the way they expect, they get all annoyed by it.
I have endless discussions with relatives who are not upset about the forecast being wrong, but they are upset about the weather. It's hot, it's cold, it's humid, and it's like, what is the point of complaining about that?
Yeah.
It's like, it's too hot. I mean, I'm sweaty. It's like, yes. And complaining about it is probably going to make you hotter and not solve any part of the problem. But, we're only human.
And I genuinely think it relates to how we interact with our tools as well. Going back to the conversation about the photographs and how, we get given so much that it can do, and then get annoyed when it can't, and feel let down when it can't, and stressed when it can't. Oh, talking about stressed, I have 2 very elderly parents, and my mum's had to go into hospital, and she's now in a care home, and my dad's trying to go and visit her, and he's never been there before, so he realises he'll need some kind of guidance. So he's reading the manuals. He's still got 2 cars, so he's reading the manuals for both cars and doesn't understand either of them. He's got no clue how to use the sat-nav. So he thinks he'll use his iPhone, which he doesn't touch from one month to the next. So Muggins here is trying to talk him through setting up Apple Maps to get him to this place on his iPhone. And my goodness, just that. And it's a salutary lesson, actually, just how challenging technology can be to some people, and for understandable reasons, I think the low point was when he said, what I was saying, you make sure you've charged it up before you leave, or be able to charge it in the car. He said, how do I do that? Well, you plug it into the USB socket. What's a USB socket? And that was the point I began to crumple.
Yeah, I mean, it's much easier to use, but the level of complexity is orders of magnitude larger than it.
Yeah.
So I actually think it's interesting how there is a certain generation that perhaps were the first to engage with digital technology, and basically at some point were left behind.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
they're very comfortable with stuff that is complicated, like, file systems and stuff, and databases and folders.
Yeah.
But then when you get to, okay, now you have to turn on Find My Phone, they don't.
No, and it's like that because Dad used to work in computing, and as you say, he's not afraid of complexity, but that's the problem because he tries to make things complicated, and like even things like I'm able to discern that he's got to the bit of maps where it's asking him to search for something, and I know that the search field at the top with the magnifying glass and the flashing cursor in it is where his eyes should have gone, but no, he reads the entire list of everything else that's on that page. About where's my car and favourite restaurants near you. And I'm going, no, Dad, just type the bloody postcode into the bit that's flashing.
Well, his son put that there. It's important, right?
I know.
Yeah. And now they did pilot a spacecraft on a touchscreen. How cool is that?
I know. Well, and there's... That's the kind of contrast, isn't it? I mean, you've got a billionaire funding sort of privately, if you like, this thing flying over a world that's kind of falling apart.
Well, I mean, he's charging NASA. NASA is paying for the privilege, so...
Well, this is true. But yeah, I mean, somebody made that point the other day that actually most large-scale technological advances are still government-funded by some method or route. Which I thought was an interesting point to make. But nonetheless, it's that contrast between the capability of doing that at the same time as everything else underneath seems to be falling apart.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is interesting in terms of technology how SpaceX brought a completely different angle to rocket science. Mm-hmm. And how they went... it was in the presentation. It was almost odd, the fact that the spokesperson for NASA was sort of admitting this, and we say at NASA we always look at everything all the way down to the smallest detail. And this means that it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to do anything. While SpaceX have this much faster iteration cycle. And it is true, because it's incredible how fast they were able to do. I mean, the fact that they land the booster back on Earth on a floating boat, actually a drone boat in the middle of the ocean by itself, and I mean, they have been doing this quite consistently for the last few years. I mean, they had very small number. I mean, after the first few incidents, and this was the whole point. They tried, they failed, but they figure out what was to fix. They fix it, tried again, failed, fix it, tried again, failed. But they have been doing this so quickly that they were able to progress much faster than anybody else. Because if you look at the difference between the technology used, even the latest version of technology used on a space shuttle, which was a 1981 core technology, but it did get a few updates. And what was used last week, I mean, it's just a completely different generation. And basically, we're 9 years since the last shuttle mission.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that SpaceX events are almost more interesting than new Apple products.
Almost. But I was thinking as you were describing that iterative fail fast and learn kind of process, and just thinking, gosh, could we apply that to civic life? Could we apply that to government or democracy? Or because we tend to get stuck. I mean, one of my daughters was talking about, bizarrely, she was watching Prime Minister's Question Time today, and just all the antiquated rituals in there. And not to be against rituals have their place, but we've been basically trying to follow the same way of doing things for centuries, and it appears not to be working anymore.
Well, I guess that part of it would be decentralizing and working at a smaller community level.
Totally.
Because there is a lot of things that were provided by a centralized system that might no longer be necessary.
Yeah.
While others are. I mean, the NHS is a pretty good thing to have, and to have centralized, and to have be able to shift resources quickly and to negotiate quickly is good. If you look at, for example, healthcare in Italy, at some point, which is regional, at some point one of the problems they had is that from Lombardy it was easier to move a sick person to Germany than to the neighbor region.
Well, but then, and that begs the question about national boundaries, doesn't it, as well? And
but on the other hand, if you work on smaller scale, you can run experiments, and you can have a let a thousand flower bloom approach, and see what works, what doesn't, and then embrace what is working better.
And you solve that problem of interoperability between the small units better. It's not inevitable that small units can't talk together and work together.
Yeah, I guess that the problem is that in civic environments, very often if you do something very wrong, people suffer.
Yeah.
So it's not like, let's try to see if we can use this methodology to support and if you fail, what happens? So failure is a bit more risky. But on the other hand, the point is that we just continue using the old wrong methods for no reason at all.
That's right.
And we're still making mistakes, and people.
I was going to say, still people still suffer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, if we do this with agile methodology, then people will suffer. Unlike what is happening now in this country,
but that's been the threat.
Thousands of people died.
That's been the threat of chaos that those in power have manipulated for centuries. That if we don't look after everybody, if we don't maintain control, we will end up with chaos, and chaos will be distress and painful, and people will die and blah blah blah. And you think, well, that's what's happening now. How much worse can it get? Well, it can get worse. I'm not being naive about that, but certainly fear is a great control mechanism. That's for sure.
And with this nugget of wisdom, albeit a slightly negative wisdom, I think we can wrap up this episode.
Stay safe.
Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.